Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight we travel far to the south, beyond cities and roads, into a place where the world feels older, quieter, and endlessly alive. Wherever you are, settle in, let your breathing slow, and allow the edges of your thoughts to soften. Tonight's story drifts into the Amazon rainforest, a vast green expanse where rivers move like quiet veins and the trees seem to whisper to one another in the dark. But this is not a story of explorers seeking conquest or maps being drawn. It is softer than that. It is the story of a young boatman and a journey that changed how he listened to the world and to himself. Long before satellites traced the winding rivers from above, before the forest was measured and named, there lived a boy named Tomas. He was born in a small riverside village where the water was never still and the forest stood thick and endless beyond the shore. His home rested on wooden stilts just above the river's edge. At night, the sound of water moving beneath the floor was constant, soft, almost like breathing. His mother wove baskets from palm leaves, her hands moving with quiet rhythm. His grandfather, once a skilled boatman, now sat most days in a hammock, watching the current as if it still had something to teach him. And Tomas spent his time between them, not quite a child, not yet grown. From a young age he learned the river, not through lessons or words, but through presence. He watched how the surface changed with the wind, how certain birds skimmed low when rain was coming, how the water darkened near deeper currents. But more than anything, he listened. To the insects humming in the heat, to distant calls echoing through the trees, to the slow creak of branches shifting overhead. The forest was never silent, but it was never loud either. It existed in a kind of balance. Still, Tomas often felt something unsettled within him, not fear, not restlessness, just a quiet sense that the river led somewhere more. He would sit at the edge of the dock, feet dangling just above the water, watching the current pull steadily onward, and he would wonder what it carried with it. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of gold, his grandfather spoke. Not loudly, not with urgency, but with the kind of voice that made you listen. "There are parts of this river," he said, "that do not show themselves to everyone." Tomas turned, curious. His grandfather's eyes remained on the water. "Some places you cannot find by looking," he continued, "only by listening." Tomas said nothing, but something about those words stayed with him. Days passed, slow and warm. The sun rose early, the air thick with humidity, the forest alive with movement. And then, one morning, a man arrived. He came in a narrow canoe, gliding quietly across the surface of the river. He was older, his face lined from years beneath the sun, his movements steady and unhurried. He spoke with Tomas's grandfather for a long time. Low voices, careful words. Tomas could not hear everything, but he caught pieces. A tributary, a place deeper in the forest, a journey that required patience. When the man finally left, the air felt slightly different. That evening, Tomas approached his grandfather. "I want to go," he said. There was no surprise in the old man's eyes, only a long, steady look. "Then you must be willing to move slowly," he replied. and to hear what most people ignore. Tomas nodded. The journey began at dawn. Mist hovered just above the water, soft and pale, as if the river were exhaling. Tomas and the older boatman pushed off in silence. The village faded behind them, replaced by walls of green, dense and layered. The river narrowed as they moved deeper. Branches stretched overhead, weaving together, filtering the sunlight into soft, shifting patterns. Hours passed, marked only by the slow dip of paddles and the gentle movement of water against the canoe. Tomas tried to ask questions, but each time the words felt unnecessary. The man beside him did not rush. He watched, he listened, he waited. And slowly, Tomas began to do the same. He noticed how the forest changed. The calls of birds grew softer, less frequent. The insects hummed lower, more distant. Even the river itself seemed to move differently. Not faster, not slower, but deeper. At one point, the boatman raised a hand. They stopped paddling. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, faintly, Tomas heard it. A sound, almost like wind, but steadier. Water moving over stone. The man nodded slightly and guided the canoe toward a narrow opening, barely visible between the trees. They entered slowly. The space beyond felt hidden, as if it had been waiting quietly, unnoticed. A small stream flowed there, clear and cool, winding gently through smooth rocks and shaded earth. They stepped out onto the bank. The ground felt different beneath Tomas's feet, cooler, softer, almost still. He looked around. The forest here was quieter than anywhere he had been before. Not empty, but settled. The boatman sat on a fallen log, saying nothing. Tomas remained standing for a while, unsure. Then slowly he sat as well. Minutes passed, or perhaps longer. Time felt less defined here. And then, without effort, without intention, Tomas noticed something. His thoughts had slowed. The usual questions, the quiet pull towards somewhere else, had faded. All that remained was what was around him. The soft movement of water, the distant rustle of leaves, the steady rhythm of his own breath. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he understood. The river did not lead somewhere more. It led here, to this moment, this place, this quiet understanding. When he opened his eyes again, the light had shifted. The boatman stood, ready. They returned to the canoe and began the journey back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The river widened once more, the sounds of the forest returning, layer by layer. By the time the village came into view, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. Tomas stepped onto the dock, feeling different, though nothing around him had changed. That night, he sat beside his grandfather. They watched the river together as it moved steadily onward. "Did you find it?" the old man asked. Tomas thought for a moment. Then he nodded. Not because he had reached a place hidden on a map, but because he had learned how to be still enough to notice it. And in the days that followed, the river remained the same. The forest still hummed, the water still flowed, the world still moved as it always had. But Tomas listened differently, more patiently, more fully. And sometimes, when the light was just right, and the air felt especially quiet, He could sense it again. That hidden stillness just beneath everything. Not a place to travel to, but something to return to, again and again. And now, as this story comes to rest, let your own thoughts drift just as gently, like a quiet river, moving without effort, carrying nothing, needing nowhere to go. Rest well.